It's a 2000 Nissan Altima. We're about to replace two motor mounts. This motor mount is the front center mount, goes in like this. And this here is the side mount, going right here. This is held in to the cross member by two bolts, one here, and one bolt going through here to hold it to a bracket. The front mount, this is the front mount right here, okay? And right here is the bracket. This bracket here holds the front mount. This bracket is bolted to the engine and down to the cross mount, cross support right here. So we'll be loosening this screw right here. I believe that's a 14 millimeter. And another one right here. And then the bolt that runs through the center of the mount to replace it. Okay, we have to loosen this nut and bolt right here that goes through the center of the motor mount, the front motor mount. Using a 14 millimeter socket with ratchet and a 14 millimeter wrench, you can loosen this nut. Take the nut off. Okay, once it's off, now what I'm going to have to do is jack the assembly of the engine and transmission assembly up to relieve the pressure on this bolt. All right. I usually place the jack underneath the transmission casing because it's stronger than putting it underneath the oil pan of the engine. You don't want to dent that pan. If you're doing a car that has a pan underneath the transmission, you don't want to support it by that point either. It's always a good idea to get a piece of wood, maybe a 2 by 6. Doesn't have to be this long. I just can't find my short piece. About half of this that you put on the plate on top of the transmission, and then slide that underneath on top of the jack, and then slide that underneath the transmission. This will help prevent any damage to the transmission. Okay, now that it's jacked up, the pressure is off the bolt, you can pull this bolt out. Yeah, make sure you keep your nut and bolt together so when it's time to put it back together, you don't have to go hunting all over the place. Now we're going to remove the top two screws that we loosened earlier with the 14 millimeter. That's one. And two. screwdriver or a drawbar, pry driver as I call it. You can get down in here. And work out the old mount. As you can see, this is split right here and here. So in effect, this metal piece in the center is now all loose. Position is light so you can try and show you. See that? If you notice on this mount, this hole isn't exactly in the center of the mount. Okay, so it matters whether you put it in this way or this way. All right, if you put it in this way, the hole will be more towards the front of the car. If you put it in this way, the hole will be closer towards the back, and this is the proper way to go. If you're not sure, compare it to the old one when you take it off. Watch where, the position of that hole when you're taking the old one off. Okay. Bring the light around so you can see. Okay, and just turn it a few times until you're sure it started. Or you can keep tightening it. If you're not going to use air, so since I might use air, I will turn it about 3 times and then hit it with the power tool. Okay, this one is already in. And now I'm going to tighten them down. Snug them up first, front and back. Okay, and we're gonna line up the center one and run that through. Sorry I didn't show you this while putting it in, but we had some issues here, and once we found a solution, we just went ahead and did it. Putting this bracket in, this seemed to be a little bit off compared to the newer one. Compared to the original one. And sometimes these aftermarket parts just don't line up right. So what we had to do, we had to loosen the bracket that goes from the engine here to the to accommodate the mount. You have 2 bolts, one here and one here. We had to take them off, line the mount up with the center hole, run that bolt through. Then we had to line up these 2 here to hold it down to this cross member. In order to do that also, we had to loosen the bolts on the bottom of the cross member that holds the cross member to this front, to the front of the car. Once we got everything lined up and all the bolts in place, right, then we tighten them down. Just to add, all you need for this job is 14 millimeters socket, extension, and I use a 14 millimeter socket and a 14 millimeter wrench on here. And those 2 bolts on the bottom, they have 17 millimeters.